Hello and welcome to the IBF Education Podcast. Well, I'll be talking to non-native English language learners about their experience learning English and about why they chose to learn the English language in the first place. Today, I'll be speaking with Cecilia. How are you doing today, Cecilia? Are you okay?
Hello, Jacob. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. I'm doing very well myself, thank you. How's your day going so far? Are you having a good day?
Yes, I have a splendid day and excellent. It's a bit hot, but summer is coming, so uh, we are getting used to this hot.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get used to the heat in this country.
Yes.
I say that every year. I say every year I'm going to adjust to it. I'm going to acclimatize, and it never happens.
Never happens. Every year is hotter.
Oh, definitely. It's going to be a bad summer, that's for sure.
I think so.
So, for those watching, can you say where you're from?
Yes, of course. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I was born here and I live here since then. It's a big country from South America. And Buenos Aires is a big city and it has a lot of places to visit. It's a very cultural city. My cat is here, sorry. We are well known for the tango, our tango singers and dancers. We are also well known for our football players and our football clubs, huge clubs like Boca or River. They are famous here. Buenos Aires is also, Argentina in general is also famous for the meat. We export a lot of huge amount of meat every year, and we used to make asado here. It is like a barbecue.
Similar. It's like,
Similar.
yeah, it's like a grilled meat, I guess. Like barbecue for us is more like burgers and sausages, I guess.
Okay.
So like for anybody watching, asado is like a huge piece of meat that is grilled on normally a coal-fired grill, and it's really good.
It's really good. Yes, we like to share it with our family or friends, like, I don't know, maybe to celebrate a birthday or just to watch a football match. This is very common between us. And before the asado, we make a picada that is like maybe a snack with olives, salami, cheese, bread, and things like that. This is also very common here. I don't know if you have a name for that in English.
No, we don't have picada. I mean, the closest I think a lot of people would understand in Europe to be like Spanish tapas, but it's more focused on the cheese and the meat as opposed to the nuts and all those kind of things.
Okay.
I think
I
tapas is the
love
closest you'll
picadas.
get. Yeah, same. They're brilliant. So
Yes.
tasty.
And I don't know, but beyond our culture, this country is huge, and you have a lot of places to visit with snow, with falls, with jungle, the beaches, everything. You can go from one weather to the opposite in a very short time, uh, short period of time, and that is beautiful for us and for the tourists, of course. They can they can see everything in one country.
And what would you say is your favorite part of Argentina?
It's a difficult question because I know almost all the country. I love the north with the falls and the mountains, but the south is lovely. Bariloche, Ushuaia, we have amazing places, and it's unfair to choose one.
I'm going to make your question even harder now. So, if you're to think about all of the most important attractions in
Yes,
Argentina across the whole country, what would you say is the most impressive of all of them?
I would choose Iguazu Falls. I went there 3 or 4 times, and I would choose them. They are amazing. It's like with so much life there, like you are part of the landscape. It's amazing.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I'd love to see this. For those who don't know, Iguazu Falls separates Argentina and Brazil. So
Yes,
you can cross over to Brazil, right, from Iguazu
yes, you
Falls?
can see them from the Brazilian side or from the Argentinian side. We share them.
Wow. Yeah, I need to experience this in the future.
Yes, it's a must. You have to.
Well, there we go, everybody. If anybody is coming to Argentina, go and visit Iguazu Falls. It becomes highly recommended.
Yes, highly recommended.
So, what do you do for a living, Cecilia? What is your job?
Well, I'm a flight attendant. I've been flying for almost 25 years in different companies, but due to the COVID pandemic, the airline retired its base from Buenos Aires, so I'm not flying anymore. And I have been working in a vaccination center for 1 hour and a half, more or less, um, since then.
For a year
But
and a half.
yes, yes, due to the pandemic, and I'm not flying anymore. But you'll never know.
That's fair. Well, I hope you managed to get back to it, especially where air travel is come back in small droves anyway.
Yes, I hope so.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask you about your experiences flying in particular. So how often did you have to use English on flights?
Well, uh, working on the planes, um, I use English a lot, not only to communicate with the passengers, but also with the ground personnel, like customs or immigration in other countries. And also, we use it on board with the different issues that happens there, but very technical words that belongs to the planes world, um, like I don't know, takeoff, landing, fasten your seatbelt, read the safety instructions card, things like that. We have written announcements that we read on board, but when you read them, you don't even think about what you are saying. It's like automatically that you do that. So it's that you are not speaking in English. It's something that you read and you are used to that. Um, then you have things that happens every day, and you have to solve them with foreign people. And in that case, is very useful. Um, the announces that you made is they are like important for them to know how to do, where to go, and things like that. And when I entered the company, when I was very, very young, many years ago, you have to do a test in English to enter the company, at least in English. If you have more languages, it's better, but English is the must here in Argentina. They ask you to record a video speaking in English or short video, and you have to do that, or to speak with a person that will test your level. So it is important. In my job, it's very important.
Yeah, really important. And obviously, being able to communicate in English in a crisis situation in particular must be
Yes,
very important.
especially that, because maybe the first thing you think or that comes to your mind is in Spanish. Of course, it's my native language, and you have to do it fast and to translate it on your mind and say it. We are, as we have written announces, we know where to look for that words or the things, but it's important to be with the practice of speaking, especially because if you don't practice, for example, I have studied English since I was a kid, but there was many years that I didn't speak in English. So you lose that fluency that it is so important, especially to speak, not to understand. Since I take conversation classes, I feel that I started speaking in English again. In one way or another, I can say what I want to say. Of course, with a lot of mistakes, but I can say what I want. The same that I can understand what the person is trying to tell me. Maybe asking him questions, but I can get what the other person is trying to tell me.
That's the best way to do it, though. I mean, because this is something we do naturally in language anyway, is that when we don't understand the full context of something, we ask questions because maybe we understood little bits of it, and that's enough to formulate a question. And then with the question, you get more context. So it just enhances your ability to gather information. So it's the best skill that I think anybody can learn in a language is learn how to formulate questions because
Yes.
questions lead to more vocabulary, they lead to better understanding, and it makes the conversation more enjoyable. It makes it seem like you're actually interested. I think a lot of the time when people try to speak, and I think this is one of the big problems in teaching the English language in particular is um, a lot of people just want to say what they have to say
Yes.
and not listen or try to take in or not ask questions. And you can say things affirmatively or negatively in whatever statement that you want, but the statements are not going to help you develop your English. It's the questions that do. It's the questions and then listening.
Yes, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. It's a conversation. You speak, you talk, and you can ask the other person things that you are interested in. That's a conversation.
100%. And this what it is. I mean, there's always the concept of like, oh, this is a boring conversation or something like this. And it's like, okay, well, you're not listening hard enough if it's boring. Like you haven't listened hard enough to find the right question to ask. Because as long as you ask the right questions, there's not a single thing that I've ever talked about that I found boring because I generally try to find the right questions to ask. And once you find the part that's at least interesting for you and you can ask questions about that, it's easy. It's easy to communicate. And as you
Yeah.
feel like you're enjoying the conversation more, that definitely improve your fluency when you speak, 100%.
Yes. For example, in the classes, we talk about different topics, and maybe someone wants to tell bottle, and you don't remember that specific word in English, but you can say it is something that you use to pour water in, and you have to do it in other way. But the important thing is to make other people understand what you are trying to say.
For sure, you've always got to go around the idea. It's vital, actually. Because there's a common thing of a lot of people translating words between languages. Not only is this a really cumbersome process, like the actual thought of thinking in your native language, then finding the translation in English and then having to try and say it, it just doesn't work. It can happen occasionally, but it's not a lot. If you've got like a big, long, complicated sentence, most people will know this. You just give up and you just speak in your native language.
Of course, maybe it
Yeah,
works for one word, but not for a conversation.
exactly. And the likelihood is, even for the one word, it's not nobody, unless you've had the same conversation a lot of times, so you kind of have a good understanding of what people may say and how you're going to respond based on previous experience. You should always be going around the idea. It's something I say a lot is you're you're probably not going to be prepared for most of the conversations you're going to have, not unless maybe it's your profession or it's something you've invested a lot of time in and you've really acquired so much knowledge, and then from that you'll acquire lots of vocabulary that can help you and kind of organize your thoughts within a conversation. Most conversations you can have almost zero organization unless you really
Yeah,
sit there for 20 minutes, plan out, write all your notes and those kind of things, and that's not going to happen in the majority of situations.
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's a very automatic process speaking. I think this is why you can't rely on grammar when you speak, because speaking is always forgiven. I think people think I always get the thing that people always say, "Oh, I don't want to speak with Tarzan English." And it's like, but there's a really interesting quote that I heard the other day. I can't remember who said the quote, but it was something like, um, "Language is the only thing in the world where knowing a little is good." In most other things in the world, learning a little bit of something is not very good because it doesn't give you enough um, enough resources to do enough of whatever that skill is. But language, even just knowing a couple of words, can aid any situation, and that's how people
Yes,
should view it. Not they've got to be
yes.
perfect.
And it is very different when you learn a language and you enjoy it. And different is when you have to learn it
Yeah,
because someone asks you to, and it is a rule that you must know English. Um, I have always studied English and I liked it, but I knew a lot of people that said, no, English is not for me. I don't like English. I don't understand. Okay, but maybe because you don't like it or you didn't find the way to enjoy learning English. I really enjoy it. Maybe because I don't have the like the way I don't have to know it to work or I can speak, but I really enjoy it. And I like knowing people. I'm a very social person. I want to speak with the people when I'm in another country. I like to express myself to ask things and everything. So I I think it is for me it is very useful and I enjoy it very much.
definitely. I always find it interesting when people say they don't enjoy learning a language. I think most people, not all, but most people enjoy socializing. It's kind of a really important thing to say you don't like learning a language seems silly to me in that respect. I mean, you can be bored of grammar classes because they're exceptionally. I mean, I really like grammar, but it's it's interesting for me, but it doesn't help your ability of speaking. It's for writing predominantly.
They are
I,
different things.
yeah, for sure. I mean, grammar rules play no very little part in formulating spoken speech at all. Really, it's more of a concept for grammar. You kind of naturally acquire grammatical structures generally through listening and reading. Those are generally the two ways that we do it. I think there's not much research on this, but it's my inclination that to acquire a lot of the grammatical structures of English in particular, you're probably going to have to spend at least somewhere in the region of 2,000 hours listening, something like that.
Mhm.
And not only that, I mean, from the listening, you're giving yourself time. I think a lot of people are forced to speak in situations, and you can't force speech. Um, Children and adults are exactly the same in this way. If you look at how children learn languages, and it's really interesting when you watch young children in particular who are learning their first words. They they copy you, but they don't speak until they feel like they've grasped it and they
Yeah.
understand the context and what I'm saying. It's like, and this is perfect. This is how it should be. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with language is because of anxiety, especially as
Yes.
adults. Anxiety just kills your ability to speak in particular. And it's because you can't be forced to speak. You
Mm-hmm.
have to give yourself enough time to listen and take in and acquire. And when you feel ready, you can use it. The amount of times I hear people learning like big long lists of verbs or nouns, and it's like,
Yes.
yeah, maybe you could translate the idea, but you can't use the word when you need it.
Yes.
And that's because they haven't listened enough to the language. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something really important. But also, just to go back to your point as well on you were talking about why people probably didn't enjoy languages. I think um, this is a really interesting question that I've been thinking a lot about recently. I think it's one, as I said before, partly to do with grammar classes being very boring, generally speaking. Um, but two, if you want to, just like in your first language, you're not going to progress anywhere unless you enjoy something. It's like the only place where we really get a huge diversity of information in life is through books and through school. That's about it. That's why generally people pick up languages over a huge, diverse range of subjects. It's generally because of school, and especially as for adult learners, people should really focus on what they enjoy with languages. Don't torture yourself to learn 1,000 verbs that most of which you probably don't even use in Spanish as a translation. No, you've got to find the topics that really interest you and
Yes.
immerse yourself in them continuously. And when you feel ready, then speak.
Yes. I think maybe here in our country, it is mandatory to in secondary schools to speak in English. You have English classes in every school. So I think maybe we associate that that speaking in English to that times when you have to do it right and you were tested and you were very nervous before the classes and things like that. Maybe that's the reason many people uh, don't enjoy that. Um, but if you think it, speaking in English with um, things that you enjoy, it will be easier. And maybe if you think that about a tool to help you in other country to travel, you would enjoy it most.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, it's far more enjoyable if you enjoy the content you're trying to
Yes,
procure. That's for sure. But
of course.
also, this is interesting. I've just read all the research on this to reaffirm it this week, and I already knew this from a couple of years ago, but it just reconfirmed to me that testing equates 0% to language acquired. Testing helps zero when it comes to
Zero.
language. 0%.
It
Yeah,
doesn't help.
yeah, doesn't help
Yes, I
in the
agree.
tiniest little bit. Yeah, no, it's incredible. And people are like, well, how am I supposed to know what level you are? Well, because everyone's always worried about like, I want to be a C1 or I want to be a B2 or these kind of things. And it's
Yes,
okay. I mean, if you're going to base yourself on the English language framework, I mean, that's a combination of listening, writing, speaking, right? So
yes,
if you want to judge yourself collectively on all those things, then okay, you can test writing a lot easier. You can probably test listening easier, but you can't test speaking that that easily, because everybody acquires different vocabulary about different things. You can
Yes,
kind
of
of learn the
course.
vocabulary you need for a test, and it will be out of your mind. You'll probably never use it again. But when it comes to speaking, it's so unique and it's so personal that you just have to listen to the people around you and spend time finding your voice in the topics that you like. So
Yes,
actually, the framework for speaking doesn't work even in the European framework. The only thing that seems to work um, is to find relevance within the language. So what are the things that I enjoy talking about? Because maybe you really like talking about let's say you really like talking about food. Okay, and maybe I don't. We're not going to have an enjoyable conversation.
yes,
But
that's true.
maybe we could both talk about football, and probably we both like football to a degree, or something that we have similar, and we'll find common ground in that way. But we're never going to speak perfectly about everything. We should only be
Yes,
fluent in the things that we enjoy, and we're never going to be fluent in anything else unless we really spend a lot of time in that area.
yes. I think that maybe you know a lot about football, and I don't have idea. So it is hard to me to speak about something I don't know, even in Spanish. So, so imagine in English and the same. Maybe I'm trying to talk with someone about planes, about airline world and all of that, and the other person is not interested in that or doesn't know anything about that. So we can have a conversation, a fluent conversation, an interesting conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And it's finding common ground. It's always finding common ground in conversations. Um, I don't know if you definitely don't do this in Spanish as far as I can see it in Buenos Aires, but maybe in other parts of the country, I don't know. But we this is kind of how we use the present perfect in English. Present perfect's a really good way of navigating quickly through different topics to see what people want to talk about. So I'd be like,
Yes,
"Oh, have you watched the football today?" And you'd be like, "No, I haven't." Okay, you don't want to talk about that. All right. Uh, and you'll go to
yes.
the next thing.
Here it's not so common to use that tense,
No,
but it's
everything
true
seems
that
important though in that sense. Well, there's only really five
if you say
things you would talk
yes or
about.
not, it's difficult to continue speaking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, exactly. If you just say yes or no, it's over with quickly. But you can, if you ask enough questions, you find the way to find the common ground and continue that conversation. Um, but what I've noticed here in Buenos Aires is that um, people generally talk about the same things all the time. I don't know if that's just my experience, but it's always
It's
generally about politics, inflation, the cost of something at
weather,
the shops, weather, yeah,
football,
football, yeah, food. It's kind of
food.
five or six
Yes,
topics, right?
yes.
So I'm very good at speaking about those things in Spanish now. But if you ask me to speak about someone else, I've got no idea.
Yes, that's true. All the same, all the time speaking about the same things, you turn out knowing how to speak about those things, of course.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Even sometimes it's not. I start turning my brain off to conversations now, especially about inflation and things. After all these years of being here, I find it very boring now. So I've stopped acquiring anything there.
You can say, I don't understand, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's get out that situation.
Yes, it's boring for me too. I understand everything, but I don't like to speak about inflation. It's too
No,
boring.
yes, completely, completely. We know inflation's bad. The end.
Yes.
Like, so, what do you think is the most difficult thing for you to grasp in English?
The most difficult. Maybe there's a lot of things, but I frequently confuse. I don't know. Maybe for you it's the easiest thing in the world, but numbers. It's a subject to me. I don't know why. I know 100, thousand, million. I know, but when I have to say quickly a number, it makes me, and I don't know, I am nervous and I confuse the numbers. Well, the tenses, of course, and maybe when you use the singular and the plural, that are mistakes that I make always.
Those are
If
hard things, to be fair, in
it's a hard
English.
thing,
Yeah.
I have to think, stop and think, but I want to talk, so I make mistakes, of course.
I would say the minor mistakes, though, and in fact, all native English speakers make the same mistakes. I was looking at the scientific evidence the other day to see if there was like a generalized progression for language learning. And I mean, the results are very, very inconsistent across the board because, as I already said, people learn languages in their own kind of unique way. That's where you kind of maximize your language time, I guess. But what was quite clear is that you generally learn um, the ing form before you acquire that very, very quickly, as opposed to, say, adding an S for the third person singular when it comes to simple present. For example,
Yes.
he does, like the SDES or the IES, right? That's a very late rule, and they did some studies on this in England, and they found that um, most native English speakers didn't acquire that rule naturally until past the age of 10 years old.
Oh,
So even
so
for
it's a
native
difficult.
English, oh, it's really
Yes.
difficult. I mean, it's a really difficult rule, I think. And this is why you can't rely on grammar. It's too logical for the process of speaking, and it gets very complicated if you have to put that through your brain at the moment.
Yes,
Um,
and you have, as we said, people who want to translate everything. And we
yeah,
don't have here in Spanish the auxiliaries like do, does,
yeah.
did. And they don't get the idea because they want to translate it, and we don't have a translation. It doesn't exist here. And that's a hard part of English learners here too.
It's a really, I mean, auxiliary verbs are difficult and modal verbs as well because you just don't have them in your language. But also, I think people are not taught why they're needed. It's not just structural. I mean, obviously that's important, but uh, without it, in culturally, it can sound very rude if you don't add do. Like for example, I mean, if you were to say, you want this. Sounds like a statement, very aggressive, right?
Yes, it's
Culturally,
aggressive.
we don't like that. So say, do you want this? The intonation's softer. So the
Yes.
auxiliaries really help with your intonation and generally to soften what you're saying and make it sound a little bit politer. That's a cultural thing. Spanish is a very blunt language. The more I've learned it, the more blunt it gets.
Yes, yes, and we have a lot of verbal tenses that maybe you don't have, but
Yeah.
we don't use them all.
Mhm.
So and we you have different types of Spanish and English, of course, but if you are used to the Spanish from Spain, you won't understand a word here in Buenos Aires because it's totally different, the accent, but the words we use. Uh,
Castellano.
Castellano,
Yeah.
perfect Castellano doesn't have anything to do with our Spanish or
Mhm.
porteño here in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And well, it should I think it should be considered its own language, actually, a derivative of Spanish, because it's very, very different.
Very, very different. Yeah.
I prefer it though. Like like a traditional Spanish from Spain is a lot more complicated, I think. It's kind of more simplified Spanish here in Argentina, I think. It's the
Because you are
phrases
getting
that
used to us.
Well, it's the phrases are complicated because you have
Yes.
very unique phrases, and it took me a little while to kind of get the context for them. I just kept listening, and I picked up on most of them. But that's going to be the case in any language. That's never really the concern for me. But I think there's a whole other level of complication in Spain, especially with Spanish, with like a which tense is it? It's the you plural, I think it is. What you would say is like things like estace and those kind of sounds on the end, which you don't use here.
No.
So
Yes. I know I won't be an English speaker like a native, never, because I'm Latin American and I'm Argentine, and I will speak as a foreign for exchange for English speakers, but I don't want to sound like a native because I know I just want to make my brain work to to be allowed to say what I want to say and to understand the other people that is trying to tell me something. That is my goal. Of course, it is beautiful when someone speak very with the sound and with the correct words and everything. But I'm learning, so I'm trying to do my best every day, and I have a lot of to learn. I know that.
it's interesting when it comes to accents because I don't think accents are something you can really learn, actually. You
You
definitely
can
acquire
copy
them.
them, maybe.
Yes and no. I've thought about this a lot recently. You can definitely copy accents because actors do it all the time.
Hmm.
But is that going to translate into real life if you're acting? There'll be a
Yeah.
point where the acting wears off. Um, and also, I mean, you can think about it this way, like you could think about why we have accents in any language. And really, accents are an identity marker. They're to
Yeah.
show that you're part of a certain region or part of a certain group. So I always find it funny when I meet people who try to speak, who are non-natives, who try to speak with a perfect RP English, received pronunciation, which is kind of the Queen's English, if you like. And it's got a completely different meaning for me in England. Like if you've got that kind of accent, you're in the highest high part of society. You can't get any higher. It's the top 1-2% of the country that are behind closed walls that you will never meet. And if you were to speak that way to say somebody in Liverpool or Manchester or even in London to some degree, you could run into some problems there because people may think that you're taking the mick, and you may
Mm.
have a problem. I know for a
Yeah.
fact you got to be very, very careful with accents, and also I do think it's something that comes within you. It's something
Yes.
that comes to your confidence, and something about your personality that derives your accent.
Yes, I agree. Here in our country too, we speak all different in different regions of the country. We have very different sounds for the same words or phrases. It's common, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's common in every language. But I think people need to start focusing on how they sound. If you want to, I think there are definitely ways that you can acquire native like sounds, that's for sure. I do think it takes a lot of exposure though. Um, there's not really been any studies conducted specifically on this, but my hunch is it's going to at least take 2 to 3 thousand hours of being around native speakers and only listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is how children develop accents, actually. This is my inkling is that children spend so much time just listening because they can't make sounds or they can't communicate.
Yes.
Um, but they spend a lot of time listening, and I think this is the part that really helps. Um,
Yes.
if adults did the same, it's a longer process. It's a lot longer process, and a lot of adults don't have the time to do it. But if they could just don't try to speak, just listen and read and just let things come to you when they come. It's not like
Naturally.
you're, yeah, always naturally. You're never ever thinking in your native language um, about the words you're going to use while you're speaking. No, things just flow and they come out. It's the same in
Yeah.
any language, whether it's your first or second language.
Yes.
You've got to have enough
Indeed.
context to allow your brain to find that information and use it and
Yes.
naturalize it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's my goal to be allowed to speak. I'm not uh, trying to be a teacher or nothing like that. Just to talk and chat with foreign people here and when I travel. So I think that's the key.
It's the perfect goal. And it's something that motivates you and it's something that you enjoy. So, I mean, it meets all the parameters that I think makes you successful when learning a language.
Yes.
And nobody's going to ask you to speak biochemistry fluently. So,
I
so
hope no.
no, I hope not. I don't think even I can talk about that in great detail. So, so
Okay.
yeah, very, very good. Anyway, Celia, that was a brilliant discussion. And thank you for joining me on this podcast. It's been great speaking to you.
It was my pleasure.
And to anybody listening, thank you for watching this episode. And we'll be back next Friday with another episode. Thank you very much and have a great week. Goodbye.